Dani stood in front of the mirror after Bill had left the house, her eyes shining dangerously, not with regret or humiliation at being criticized, but with the pleasure of seeing Bill angry. Deep down, she knew she had hit the right spot in the man who had been the center of her life. The question that hung in her mind was whether the provocation stemmed from unrequited love or just from a grudge that had never been erased. Bill had broken her heart, made her lose faith in marriage and family, but he was the only one who could stir such intense emotions in her. With Andre, things were so different. He was young, attractive, ambitious, but sometimes Dani realized that he was just a reflection of the emptiness inside her, an impulsive replacement for the void Bill had left. When Dani talked about ending the marriage with Andre, she had not yet made a final decision in her heart. She tested her own limits and also tested Bill's reaction. And when Bill returned with a hypocritical face, scolding her for marrying someone half her age, while he himself had destroyed his family with similar choices, Dani felt a mixture of injustice and sweetness, because it proved that he still cared, still paid attention to her, even though his words were filled with anger. Dani saw it more clearly than anyone. Bill was jealous, Bill was angry, and that fueled the decision to prolong the marriage with Andre, not because of love, but because of a psychological war to keep Bill in an emotional spiral. Andre, of course, was not naive. He soon realized Dani's true motives. The affectionate but superficial gestures, the dreamy looks whenever Bill was mentioned, all like cold knives stabbing at his pride. Andre understood that he was just a pawn in the game of revenge and defiance between Dani and Bill. But would he back down? Part of him wanted to leave to keep his dignity, but another part of him longed to prove that he could really have Dani, make her forget the name Bill. In that struggle, Andre entered a dangerous world where male pride and the desire for recognition could make him endure humiliation. The Dupree family was not silent. Anita, with her sharp eyes, along with Vernon and Nicole, had repeatedly pointed their spears at Andre. To them, Andre was nothing more than an opportunist, a predator who wanted to climb high by clinging to Dani. Ambushes, criticisms, and even contemptuous looks surrounded him from all sides. Andre had to endure the wrath of a family that always valued honor, and in their eyes, he was the stain that Dani had deliberately brought upon herself to damage the family's image. Meanwhile, Haley stood on the other side of the battle. She couldn't bear to see Bill continue to be drawn to Dani, away from his job and responsibilities to sink into the spiral of his ex. To Haley, Dani was a constant threat, a ghost that never went away, ready to destroy everything she was trying to build with Bill. This tension turned into hidden explosions, times when Haley openly expressed her discomfort, only increasing the already accumulated conflict. But the most painful were Dani's children. They could not accept the relationship between their mother and Andre, not because of the age gap or public opinion, but because they clearly felt that this was not love. They saw their mother using Andre as a tool to get revenge on their father, and that made them angry. They loved their mother, but could not accept the way she turned family life into a revenge game. The coldness and resistance from her own children put Dani in the most difficult position. Between her twisted love for Bill, her pride in controlling Andre, and the price of being separated from her biological family. Dani is playing a dangerous game. She enjoys the power of seeing Bill angry, enjoys seeing Andre resigned, but is also torn by the emptiness inside. Bill's betrayal in the past remains like an unhealed scar, and every decision she makes now is tinged with hatred. Andre is forced into a dilemma between saving face in front of the Dupree family and proving his worth. Bill continues to be immersed in conflict, wanting to deny Dani, but unable to let go of his jealousy. And all of this explodes in a space where love, hatred, and pride intertwine, creating a tragedy that has no end. Dani had long since realized she was on a path of no return, and that made every step she took heavier and more exciting. The question of whether she could stop was no longer a matter of debate, because even when her mind told her to stop, her heart and instinct had pulled her into a spiral she couldn't escape. The events of the recent trip had only deepened that. She and Andre had drunk too much to distinguish right from wrong. The alcohol mixed with loneliness and desire had caused both of them to lose control. In truth, this wasn't the first time they'd crossed the line of intimacy, but the blindness of the alcohol made the connection more naked, harder to deny. They both woke up in a state of chaos, unsure how they'd gotten to that room, unable to remember a word that had been said, only knowing that the physical bond had once again trapped them deeper into each other. Andre looked at Dani with a mixture of pride and bitterness in his eyes. He knew Dani could never truly love him, that he was just a tool, a weapon in her hands to use against Bill. But in those drunken moments, when Dani leaned on his shoulder, when her hands sought comfort, Andre felt he had a part of her that Bill could not have. He yearned to hold on to it, but he also felt lost in a battle he could never win. The Duprees saw him as inferior, Bill saw him as a joke, Dani saw him as a means. Every time Andre woke up next to her, he wondered, was he proving his worth, or was he just drowning himself in humiliation? Meanwhile, Bill lived in a constant state of conflict. He hated Dani for being reckless and thoughtless, hated Andre for taking the place he once held, but most of all, Bill hated himself for still not being able to get Dani out of his mind. He entered her house angry, berating and criticizing, but deep down he just wanted to know if she still cared about him. Every time Dani challenged him, his eyes flashed with the pain and jealousy he tried to deny. Bill justified his actions by saying he was worried about the children, wanting to protect the family name, but he knew the real reason was that he couldn't bear to see Dani belong to another man, especially one younger than him and Andre. Bill's anger was a disguise for fear. Fear of losing control, fear of admitting that Dani could still hurt him so much. Dani, at the center of it all, bore the heaviest burden. On the surface, she seemed to be enjoying the revenge game, gloating over Bill's outbursts, using Andre as a pawn to put her old rival in a weak position. But when the door closed, Dani faced herself in long silences, and the emptiness really weighed down. Her love for Bill never disappeared. It was just transformed into rage, into a power play. Her love for Andre was never enough. It was just impulsiveness and carnal passion. What she had was not happiness, but self-destruction. The drunken times, the times she forgot her way home, were not just the result of alcohol but a manifestation of her lost direction in her soul. Dani could no longer control the line between false joy and the collapse that awaited her. Dani's children saw this and gradually distanced themselves. Anita and Vernon watched with anger and disappointment, and Nicole saw this as proof that Dani was no longer capable of maintaining the family honor. But Dani didn't bother to stop. She didn't want to, or didn't dare, because stopping meant facing Bill's pain fully, admitting that she still loved him and admitting that her every action revolved around him. Dani continued to throw herself into Andre, into drunkenness, into fighting with Bill, as a way to avoid the truth. But the more she avoided, the more she was swallowed up. And deep inside, Dani clearly felt the collapse coming, not from the outside, but from the void inside her. Bill stands at the crossroads of emotions, where reason and jealousy intertwine, turning him into a man who wants to protect his family and defeat his rival. The words he says about his children, about his family's honor and public image, at first sound reasonable and responsible, but the truth hidden deep down is much more obscure. Bill is not only worried about his children, he is worried about his own ego. Dani was once the woman who was attached to his life, the one who built an admirable family image with him. Dani's jumping into Andre's arms is like a slap in the face to his pride. Jealousy wells up in every vein, but Bill cannot admit it, because he is afraid that such an admission will make him look weak in the eyes of others, especially in the eyes of Haley. But Bill is not the type of person who sits still easily. He understands the law, he knows how to use the law to bend the truth, and he has won many times by seizing the smallest loopholes. With Andre, a young, inexperienced man with no solid foundation, Bill had more than enough power to create a fatal blow. He could hire people to follow him, collect evidence, and even create a fake scene to make Andre look like a criminal in Dani's eyes. The idea of breaking into Andre's house, putting some illegal substances, or committing financial fraud was not unfamiliar to Bill's calculating nature. Just one shady accusation would cause Andre to lose all credibility. Dani would be disappointed, and the already shaky relationship would collapse. Bill didn't need to be too harsh, he just needed to sow a seed of doubt. However, Bill was no longer completely free. Haley, the woman currently by his side, had a jealousy of her own that was even more terrifying. For Haley, Dani was a ghost that constantly haunted her, and she couldn't bear to see Bill spending too much time with his ex-wife. If Haley finds out that Bill is personally carrying out sinister plans to attack Andre, she will not let it go. Jealousy makes Haley wary, afraid that Bill's every move is not to protect the family, but to keep Dani in sight. She could sabotage the plan, even turn against Bill, turning all his calculations into counterproductive traps. In such a situation, Bill is like a cornered animal. On one hand, he is eager to prove that Dani is ruining her own life, and he will do anything to expose Andre, even using dirty tricks. On the other hand, he is restrained by Haley, who is always suspicious of his true motives and is not afraid to confront him to protect her position. Bill knows that with just one wrong move, he will not only lose Dani forever, but also make Haley turn her back on him, leading to the disintegration of their current relationship. The irony is that the more Bill tries to prove that he is acting out of the children's best interests, the more it reveals that he is acting out of unrelenting jealousy. And that jealousy may push him into reckless decisions, making Dani realize that it is he, not Andre, who has betrayed trust once again. Haley is not one to be fooled, especially when it comes to Dani, a woman she sees as a constant threat. As soon as she senses that Bill is acting shady, she immediately becomes alert. At first, it is Bill's late arrivals, his long phone calls in the dark, or his calculating gaze whenever Andre's name is mentioned. Haley knows Bill's nature too well. He never gives up, especially when it comes to a young man in Dani's arms. That's why Haley secretly follows, piecing together scattered clues until the truth gradually comes out. When she discovers that Bill is considering dark steps, hiring people to follow him, setting traps, even the idea of planting drugs in Andre's house, Haley falls into a storm of emotions. She is angry that Bill is making himself out to be a villain, but more than that, she is angry because the real reason. Everything Bill does, despite his denials, revolves around Dani. It was this obsession that made Haley feel like she was just a replacement, a latecomer, and Dani still held an unshakable place in Bill's heart. The jealousy grew so strong that it suffocated her, forcing her to consider cruel choices. Haley had two paths before her. One was to confront Bill directly, expose everything she knew to force him to admit the truth. This path would cause their relationship to explode into a war, but at least she would cut off the spiral of ambiguity. The other was to stay silent, wait, collect evidence of Bill's shady behavior, then release it at the right time to make Dani see his deceitful nature with her own eyes. If Dani knew that Bill had been involved in dirty tricks just to destroy Andre, she would despise him, shun him, and that would be the greatest gift for Haley. Dani would push Bill out of her life with her own hands, not for Haley, but for her own disappointment. A plot was forming in Haley's mind. She wouldn't stop Bill right away. She would let him continue, but she would also record the evidence, messages, documents, even photos. When the time was right, she would hand it all over to Dani, not as an enemy, but as a sober sister, as if she were trying to warn Dani about the man they both loved. This strategy, if successful, would cause Dani to withdraw permanently, while trapping Bill in the contempt of both women. But the plan was not just based on jealousy, it was also an internal struggle. Haley also faced a fear. If she made Dani hate Bill, would she still be able to keep him, or would she just leave him in the lurch? But Haley's pride was stronger. She believed that if Dani turned her back, Bill would have no choice but to cling to her. Because at that time, Haley would be the only one left, the only one who would accept him for who he was, no matter how many muddy puddles he had gotten his hands into, and in the darkness, Haley smiled coldly at the thought of that prospect. Letting Dani witness Bill's collapse, letting that old love turn into a wound that would never heal, and letting her be the only one who could lift Bill up. Thank you for taking the time to watch my video. All the content I made is just my personal speculation and sharing. If you find the video interesting and useful, please support me with a like and leave a comment. If you have better ideas or more interesting speculations, please share them in the comments section for everyone to discuss. I appreciate all your contributions and support. Sincerely, thank you.